My guest this week is Larry Schemel. Larry is originally from Seattle, Washington, and now lives in Los Angeles, California. He grew up in the 80s pre-grunge music scene in the Northwest and witnessed the scene's transformation from the small insular punk scene in the 80s to the early 90s grunge explosion. Larry has played in many bands and projects over the years, including Kill Sybil, the Flesheaters, the Gimmicks, Midnight Movies, Death Valley Girls, and Roky Erickson. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome the Revolutions Per Movie, Larry Schemel. Hey, Larry.
Hey, Chris. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I am really excited you picked You're Gonna Miss Me, a film about Roky Erickson from 2005. So many questions to ask you about your time with Roky and also what you think of the film. Also, it's really weird. The film is currently out of print and not streaming.
Right.
So I had this at the video store, but I didn't have a copy currently. So I want to thank Ryan at Jackpot Records for going into his collection and lending it to me. Because I went online. I was like, oh, wow, that's a lot to pay for this.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I did the same thing because I hadn't seen it in a while. And I was like,
yeah,
okay, I need to get a copy. I went to Amoeba and they didn't have any. I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I went online. It was like, whoa, like you can't find it anymore.
It is the sign of the times that everyone's talking about, that a lot of these things are hard to find. It's kind of incredible that some of the harder things you think would be things that would be really hard to find are kind of easy to find. You're like, oh, this really obscure thing I saw once in a flash. You're like, oh, there it is. Yeah. I found it. But then something like this that had like major distribution and backing behind it is just gone. Well, I wanted to ask you, you've been playing music for so long. Where did you first hear the 13th Floor Elevators or Roky Erickson's music in your timeline?
I guess the first time going back to the 80s, when I was getting into punk rock in the early 80s and I think around the mid 80s where I was sort of like branching out, and discovering Velvet Underground, Stooges and all that. And I was always really obsessed with 60s music. And at the time I remember discovering the Nuggets compilation and the original one. And I think that was the first time I heard the 13 Floor Elevators was You're Gonna Miss Me on that compilation. And that I think was, as far as the certain songs that really connected with me, like that one and Seeds, Pushing Too Hard, Music Machine, Talk, like all the, it's kind of tough, kind of like more punk 60s tracks. And and at the time, Back from the Grave comps were coming out, and we had an oldie station. Well, I guess it was back then. It's funny because there was classic rock wasn't a term, there wasn't classic rock radio because you'd turn on FM radio and it was just like that was 70s, like current rock. That was just what blows my mind is classic rock radio now. Like you'll turn it on and Nirvana is on, or Soundgarden, which is really weird.
Yeah, the Offspring. You're like, it's so weird. It's like classic rock, Offspring. You're like, what?
Yeah, it's so bizarre.
Happened?
And we had this oldies station, KJR, and up in the Northwest, they would play the Sonics and the Wailers and Ventures on those oldie stations because they were just the regional stuff. And I think that was hearing the Sonics is the first time where it's like, whoa, this 60s garage stuff is like tougher than most punk rock, like that I've heard. So hearing that and hearing that Elevators song, I was like really fascinated with like, this is really bizarre, like especially the Elevators, Rocky's vocals and stuff, and that weird, that sound, which is like, what the hell is that sound? That sound, is that yeah. And then, a while later reading about the band and it was like, oh, it's a jug. That's so weird. And I remember the first time,
so cool.
The first time I actually like maybe read about Roky and the Elevators was like through some of those punk zines. Like I think the one that Forced Exposure was kind of like enlightening because
Mm.
they were covering kind of beyond the, the current underground scene. They were also like, you know, talking about some of the weird. So they were talking about Beefheart and uh, like Silver Apples and just weird stuff, and they would have stories on Roky or Elevators, and that was like, okay, this is really like, you know, um, my education on some of that stuff was really because of reading those scenes, especially Forced Exposure, because Flipside and MRR and stuff, they were cool, but it was all very current and hardcore
Right.
uh, stuff. But there was other zines that were, you know, uh, into the more, yeah, kind of a broader spectrum. And there was also these garage uh, magazines like Kicks, Ugly Things, that I started to find every now. They were very hard to come by, but every now and then I'd find an issue at like Fallout Records in Seattle. Um, and I think the first Elevators record I got was was the Psychedelic Sounds, the first record, and just
Right.
like fell in love with every tune on it, like the vibe, like everything was so like mysterious and murky and you know heavy.
And they're such good songs.
Yeah,
Like every song, like a hit in an alternate
yeah,
universe.
totally.
You
Yeah,
know, it's just they're all special and kind of beautiful and weird.
yeah,
And like you said, the productions got that really underproduced 60s garage thing that veneer that seems to be all over,
yeah,
you know, those albums. It's so funny because like the Nuggets comp, it's so incredible to think that that came out in 72
yeah,
and they were already looking back 6 years,
yeah.
7 years going like this amazing
Hmm.
thing happened 7 years ago.
Yeah,
Do you
yeah,
remember?
yeah,
Could
yeah,
you
yeah,
imagine nowadays if that happened? It would just be like, remember 7 years ago?
yeah, yeah.
There's
I
this,
know.
you're like, it's just incredible. And my introduction was funny because I'd go see local bands. I'd go see the Oily Bloodmen, and I'd be like, that song, The Witch, is amazing. They'd be like, that's a Sonic song. I'd be like,
Yeah,
oh, okay, that was the best song you did. And then
yeah,
I'd find out about Sonics. I'd go see the
yeah,
Miracle Workers and be like, oh, that
yeah,
song is amazing. They'd be like, yeah, that's a 13th Floor Elevator
yeah,
song.
yeah,
You're
yeah,
like, oh, okay.
yeah,
So it was, in the 80s, so many of the bands were also really leaning into that language and had such a love for that genre that kind of at that point was out of step a bit,
yeah, yeah.
in terms of like there was the Paisley Underground thing happening, but this
Hmm.
was kind of beyond that in a weird way. This
Yeah,
was uglier and kind of like more direct, even though the 13th Floor Elevators, had psychedelic on their album cover. They're a garage band.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, they were really a garage, like a very, I mean, to use that term, punk, like that kind of fits, you know, uh, that energy of what they were doing, and definitely
Yeah,
wasn't some hippy dippy like summer love like psych music. It was very like, yeah, like tough and also mystical and trippy, but not in like a flowery way. It was more just like, this is heavy. There's something like really, you know, there's some really deep stuff in the music and lyrics.
yeah. And I feel like the myth of Rocky was really big too in the 80s.
Yeah.
You were getting little information about this guy. Where is he? Who is he?
Hmm.
Why is he?
Yeah.
But it was really cryptic,
Hmm.
and I could never really get a full picture on who he was
Yeah.
from reading stuff about him and the music he was making with the aliens even at the time. That's what's interesting about this film is rewatching it. I was really surprised, I haven't seen in a while, how little the film is really about his music.
Oh yeah.
I was really kind of like, oh, right. This is about Rocky's brother trying to get custody of him
Hmm.
and about his mom and about him not having the right medication
Yeah.
and some of the things leading up to, his schizophrenia and stuff. But did you saw this film when it originally came out?
Yeah, I saw it like shortly, like I didn't see it in the theater, but I think shortly like it'd been out for a while, and the DVD came out, and I was able to see it. And yeah, it was pretty like kind of shocking because yeah, I didn't know much about where, at that point, any information on Rocky was very hazy. And yeah, like what you're saying, where there was this kind of mystery, like where is he, what's going on, kind of like this strange Sid Barrett kind of thing, but even more mysterious because it was like he just kind of disappeared. And unless you were in Austin, you really didn't know much about his whereabouts or what his life has been like since he stopped playing music. So yeah, so I first saw it yeah, a couple years after it had came out, and it was really shocking, enlightening. And I think I can't remember the timeline, if by the time the movie had came out that he had started to reemerge again, I think. So there was, I think, I'm not, can't remember.
It was close to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the film starts in 1999, and his brother Sumner,
Yeah.
who's his youngest brother of 5, is like trying to get custody, and it opens in the courtroom against their mother, who his brother's basically saying he's living in poverty,
Yeah.
and he needs medication, and he needs to get his career back on track.
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't even see Rocky for a while. It's like about his mother, Eveyln. I don't even know where to start with her in terms of just the complicated backstory with her, in terms of her how what she thought of herself as a mother, and her pride as a mother, but also the weird pyramid of the relationship in terms of her and her sons kind of below her. And it's really haunting. She obviously she didn't believe in Rocky having medication.
Yeah.
Didn't believe in him seeing doctors or scientists, because she just thought they were misdiagnosing him, and it was kind of a negative thing. And through food and yoga he could get healthy. But that footage where he first shows up and she just starts turning on everything in the house to make noise for him so that he can sleep, is really upsetting.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it is. It's really heavy, and it's really like, yeah, their relationship and the kind of, yeah, the codependency and the weird, like um yeah, it's a really, and the other brothers, and just the whole dynamic of the family, like they're very fractured. And yeah, like her story is like very interesting. And like I'm sure there's so much, like when she's just going through old photos of herself, and the scene where she's singing along to the elevators, there's so many, like she's a very complex character. And it is like, yeah, as you like rewatching it, it really is like, if someone goes into this movie and it's like expecting a Rocky documentary or Elevators documentary, this is not what that is. This is not like the definitive Roky Erickson story or the Elevator story. This is like a snapshot of that particular time. It's amazing how with documentaries, and this one is also has that special thing of the timing of when this filmmaker decided to, like, I'm gonna like find Rocky and make this film. And the fact that it has like an arc to it. It has like this whole kind of thing where it wasn't just like, oh, I'm just gonna film a band, or like it had the story that when he was started to film the movie, like he didn't know like where this was going to go. So it's really interesting how it really uh the story, how it unravels, is really fascinating. And yeah, and it's sad but also happy. I mean, there's so much to it.
And getting the trust of Eveyln and even Rocky. At one point, like, a biographer shows up with the book he's written about
Yeah.
Rocky, and he's trying to give it to him, and he's like, no, I'm good, like,
Yeah.
no thanks. And but Eveyln is really making like outsider art about her life and her
Mm-hmm.
children, and she's sharing it, and a lot of it's really incredible in terms of just how much she thinks about it, how much she cares about it,
Mm-hmm.
but the insight of somebody being like, well, but yeah, your heart's big, but Rocky's not getting better. And yeah, you mentioned that scene, the scene where it's a tribute to Rocky. It's his birthday
Yeah.
at like a record store or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And she's singing to Splash One, like a
Yeah.
piano
Mm-hmm.
version. And she's singing like this really high falsetto, very traditional kind
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
40s style singing.
Uh-huh.
You're just like, wow, like she she's really into Rocky's art and who
Mm-hmm.
he is as an artist. But then a minute later, they cut to his son, who's like, yeah, my grandmother won't let me see him.
Yeah.
For 25 years, I've been like not allowed to see my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And so the loyalties shift a lot in this film in terms of how is this going to get better? Who's on, where is this going? It's you're right. It's kind of amazing that the filmmaker got in when he did.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's some pretty, with Evelyn's, like there's some scenes that are, when she's in the courtroom and she's showing the judge like the the little porcelain masks, and they're cracked, and it's so sad. And so because it's like, she has good intentions, and but
Yes.
her beliefs just don't align with what is best for Rocky. And it's like, and it's like she's um like has her own belief system, and it is very heartbreaking to see, her like in pain and struggling with this, and in her family, that kind of battle. But also, on the other hand, with Sumner like realizing like what's really best for Rocky, and like that dynamic is so it's just so stressful and like,
Yeah, it's family multiplied,
yeah,
It's like
yeah,
and she's defensive and feels like she's not being a good mom, and people are being critical, and she's worried about what people think. And
yeah,
again, she's making art, like you said, that porcelain sculpture where she's like, this is me and my sons, and
yeah,
then it cracked, and I think that must mean something, and she's on the stand talking about it.
yeah.
It's She believes it. She's totally like, it's heartfelt.
It is, and that's the thing. It's like she thinks, she, by showing the judge like that, like this is my art, and this is like, because she really believes this is going to help her case. And the judge,
Yes.
it was kind of like, this is probably not going to help her case, because it just shows she's
Right.
kind of on a different wavelength of, you know, uh, of what reality of the situation is. So, um, but she really does believe in what she's saying. She's not, you know, trying to like put one over on anyone. She's just like, he is comfortable with the situation.
Yeah, and Rocky also at this point is like, I want to be with mom. Like,
Yeah,
he is
yeah,
comfortable with the situation.
for sure.
He is fine with it. And it's everyone outside who's like, this is not good.
Right.
This is not good for Rocky.
Yeah.
And you finally get to see Rocky, and he talks a little bit, but not about music. And he seems he won't look in the camera, and he's
Yeah.
just talking to his mom and kind of wanders off. But then you do get a little insight into the band. They have the drummer, John Walton,
Yeah.
from the
Yeah.
13th Floor Elevator,
Hmm.
pops up. He's kind of the only one from the band who's kind of like the person who's going to talk about the elevators
Yeah.
and how they started and what they met, and then also just the damage that acid had on Rocky so early. Like, he's like,
Yeah.
his second trip he
Hmm.
took was bad, and then Rocky was just trying to take acid to kind of get better.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah.
and where he was like, I was done. He was like, I was scared. I was on that trip with him, and I was like, never again.
Yeah.
But it was kind of nice to see a little bit of, they're like talking about the Jug member, which is, again,
Yeah.
totally unique and cryptic. I mean, there were Jug players in the folk movement,
Yeah.
but there were not psychedelic harp, echoey,
Yeah.
weirdo reverb players who they're like, this is his band. I mean, he kind of started the band.
Yeah.
So we're going to lean into this jug sound
Hmm.
that doesn't sound like a jug.
Yeah.
So I was kind of glad that, I got a little insight into how these teenagers met and what they were doing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting with because the jug player being not only just an interesting instrument to be in the band, but the fact that that Tommy Hall was also such an amazing lyricist and was sort of the Svengali behind the band, and sort of like,
Right.
and his wife Clementine also being a part of the family, and you know, writing lyrics and singing, and but yeah, like, really interesting that Tommy was sort of the kind of, in a way, running the show as far as like what we're about. We're going to do the whole drug kind of uh use, and everything behind that was really, you know, with Tommy, which is, yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, I didn't know that till this film. I didn't know that I kind of didn't know the genesis of it in a way in
Yeah.
terms of where he stopped and started.
Hmm.
And then really Rocky just kept writing better songs and
Yeah.
writing better lyrics
Yeah.
and kind of eclipsing a bit.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the band did not last very long, only really put out a few proper records.
Hmm.
And it wasn't long, it was like, what, 68 or so when Rocky was jailed for possession of marijuana,
Yeah. Yeah.
which would nowadays would be laughable, but
Hmm.
and pleading insanity rather than going to jail,
Yeah.
and then that being a really bad move in the end by ending up at Rusk State Mental Hospital with total criminal people, people who had murdered people who had been involved in really
Hmm.
dark things, and he was there on marijuana possession.
Yeah.
Like being in bands with these murderers is really haunting. They talked to the people who worked there, and they were like, he shouldn't have been here. He was, it was a bad decision, but just a sign of the times, and also Texas,
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Hearing that, like, yeah, he playing in the band with these murderers, and being in that, yeah, such a depressing, pretty much just locked up, and he's still kind of like, not totally recovered from the acid trips, and so he's in this weird state where he's just like, really couldn't defend himself or do anything about, what was going on, and the fact that he got, yeah, thrown in this institution for such a petty thing. And I'm sure that had a lot to do with, yeah, just furthering his kind of like spiral into, unknown, because he was just, yeah, he didn't have much help from, you know the people around him who, yeah, yeah, just kind of like, luckily that one, I forget the guy who actually went to visit Rusk and saw Rocky and recognized him and figured
Yes.
out, like, oh man, he shouldn't be here.
Yeah, it was really, really tragic.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was eventually released in 72. It's really amazing to see letters say like sanity restored and a date and a stamp on it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then he's just out. But what's really interesting, and I wanted to see if you know anything about this, because it's, to me, in terms of his career, he gets out, and then in the 80s, he's making these amazing records with the Aliens,
Yeah.
right? Some of my favorite stuff he ever did.
Hmm.
Do you know much about like who the Aliens were, how that project came to be? Because they don't talk about it in the film.
Yeah, they don't. It's like when he got out in the 70s, and I think there was even a couple attempts at like doing Elevators reunions that kind of were, you know, and I can't, yeah, maybe Tommy or Stacy Sutherland or some of those guys tried to do some stuff with him, and didn't last, maybe a couple shows, and then he, yeah, I guess in Austin was just trying to like, just playing with random people, and one of the guys who kind of instigated the aliens, as far as I know, was this guy, Billy Miller, who was a young Elevators fan. He had this really amazing, obscure psych band called Cold Sun in like 69, 70. And they were like
Okay.
pretty Elevators kind of influenced stuff. And a record was finally released like maybe 20 years ago that was never released back then. And Billy, this is also really strange considering the Elevators had a jug player, as Billy's instrument was an electric Autoharp, like an Autoharp plugged into amp,
What?
overdriven.
On those records?
Yeah. So if you hear,
I had no idea.
there's
Wow.
strange sounds like on Two-Headed Dog and other songs where there's
Yep.
you might think it's a synth or something, but it's this overdriven Autoharp, like electric harp.
Oh my God.
And I think Billy was like kind of like was a fan and knew Rocky, and I don't know exactly how the other players got involved, but it was an amazing band that they, amazing player.
Incredible.
And so then they started the Aliens, and actually had met Billy years later when I was playing with Rocky. And so there was the Aliens, and then there was another band of the Explosives, like different lineups of, usually like punk rock bands Rocky would play in. But the Aliens is definitely the definitive like Rocky solo band. And the Eveyln is one of the greatest albums ever. So good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
White Faces is one of my favorite songs of all time.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think it's barely over 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's just, it kills me. It's like his vocals on this record are so soulful and they just destroy me.
Yeah.
And, he's doing what he was calling at the time horror rock.
Yeah.
And there's a great scene in the film where one of his ex-wives is like, I got really mad at him because he went through all of his lyric sheets and changed all the things that said Jesus or God to the devil. And they show the lyrics with it crossed out.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was just, wanting to write about vampires, goblins, the devil, two-headed dogs. And for something that is under the category horror rock from the author himself, it is some of the best rock and roll, in that 80s era ever made. They're so powerful and tight. And I was just curious because I don't know who was behind it. Like Rocky is writing the songs, but the way they've arranged them and recorded them are timeless. It's really kind of incredible.
And I think it's the Eveyln where Stu Cook from Creedence Clearwater produced the record.
Yes, that's true. I believe that's the one he did. I know he did one of them. I think that's the one. And I didn't know that till recently. Stu Cook, I didn't even know did he produce any other, was he known as a producer?
No, that's the weird thing. He played a little bass on here too. So I don't, as far as I know, like he must have produced some other bands, but it is very cool that that he produced this.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like an 80s record to me, Like to me it's like, oh, this could have been 75.
Yeah.
This could have been 83. This could be 95. It's just really a beautifully made record.
It really is. Yeah, and that the musicians, like the guitar player Dwayne Laskin, like just like where's he? Like because he was so mind blown.
I know. That's why I mean it's like this. It's like he did the Voivoids come down and play on this record? It's like it's just that caliber.
It really is
of players, and then I was trying to find out more information about them online, and I just was like, wait, this person is not in any other bands? What's going on?
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's like they really were aliens,
Yeah.
They really were, like, and the fact that the record's on 415 Records out of San Francisco, which is kind of more of a new wave power pop label, which is you know.
Right. Who do you know who else was on 415 at the time? Was
Oh
that
man,
Romeo Void?
Romeo
Were
Void,
they
yeah, Romeo Void.
right?
Maybe I don't know, maybe Translator or
Okay.
Motel. Maybe not. Oh, definitely Romeo Void though. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. You know, he's doing these other projects off and on for a while, but he's not, and he's playing out occasionally. They show some footage. And I remember at the video store I had a lot of Rocky bootleg things
Yeah.
of a European obsessed fan coming over and getting like Rocky in the back of a car and driving him around and him with a guitar singing songs, and he seems really uncomfortable, and then he opens his voice and it's just beautiful, of
Yeah.
course. Or these weird like cable access interviews,
Hmm.
or weird, Austin bar shows where it's really underattended and there's some people dancing in the front,
Yeah.
and
Hmm.
so I was before this film came out, I was kind of putting together this history through that stuff, and it was musically amazing, but very uncomfortable at the same time. It felt very
Yeah.
voyeuristic and very exploitive.
Hmm.
There's some things in the film that definitely culminate in it. One of them being him being dragged to sing at a Butthole Surfers show,
Yeah.
with a band that's there, and he doesn't even really know that he's supposed to be singing
Hmm.
or playing. They kind of trick
Yeah.
him into going, and the footage of him just being like, I don't want to do this, being polite on stage, um,
Yeah.
is really a drag, because it seems like at this point, probably a lot of people in Austin are like, oh, this weirdo burnout guy, you know, look at there he is. And
Yeah.
it seems like a cruel thing to do. And then the other one is Eleanor's film that she makes, where she's the queen and she has a coronation with Rocky. And, he was like the king of the beast and wearing like the armor of God, and they're all
Yeah.
like hailing, and he's like reciting these words that he's been given, but he's just obviously lost and doesn't know
Hmm.
really what's going on. Those two things were really kind of post aliens, kind of showing like he's not in music anymore. He's kind of lost. He's getting worse, and people aren't helping. They're like putting him on stage, kind of to
Yeah.
show him off. It's really, really sad.
Yeah. Yeah. It really is. And I think that show, the Butthole Surfers show, yeah, I think that was the last time he, you know, appeared in public trying to play shows since he reemerged, as far as what I remember. But yeah, it's very sad because he pretty much, yeah, and and the aliens and that stuff was, yeah, that was like early '80s, so that mid '80s point where he kind of like didn't want to do it anymore. Like it was pretty quick decline. It wasn't like
Yeah.
it was like he, you know, uh, yeah, it was just, yeah, and it seemed like, yeah, no one really, he wasn't getting cared for, or no one knew like what was really going on with him, because it just seemed like, yeah, he was kind of just used as like, hey, it's Rocky, let's bring him out, and you know they'll sing some songs, and he was just like over it. He was like, no, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah. It's really, really, really hard to watch that. And he does that amazing poem about the hole in the baby's head,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
which is incredible, and there's just so much going on about his family in it and his
Hmm.
life, but also just really dark poetry and imagery. And again, it seems like one of those things where they're like, let's have Rocky on. We're gonna shoot him on like video, and then who
Hmm.
knows what we'll do with it. But we got him,
Yeah.
like.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then Sumner, the brother, through the court decision, they decide that Sumner would be better taking care of Rocky than Eveyln, the mom. So he
Right.
moves back, across to the East Coast with Sumner, who is also a musician, like a orchestral trained classical musician, tuba player, and that's how he makes his living. But you don't really get a sense at this point when the film ends. Rocky is on his medication, and he's in therapy, and he's doing better, and you can just see he's doing better. But Sumner is also really wiped out
Yeah.
and is like, I didn't really understand what mom had to deal with, and I'm going broke, and it's kind of left there.
Yeah.
And so without Rocky having another chapter after this film, which is performing in front of people, this would have also been a really sad way to end the story of Rocky.
Yeah, for sure.
So how did you get involved with performing with Rocky?
It's yeah, it was just this strange series of events that playing Death Valley Girls. We played this. This is going back to maybe, I don't know, 2015 or something. We played this festival, um, in music festival in Orange County at this place called the Observatory. And yeah, it was a 2-day thing. It's like one of these like psych fest type things with a bunch of bands playing. And Rocky was playing it, so we were also playing it, so we were pretty stoked that playing this festival with Rocky and and all these other local band, like Ty Segall, OCs, all these type of bands are playing that festival. And
Yeah.
but I remember like watching Rocky's set, and it was amazing. And um yeah, just they played some elevators, solo stuff. It was really great. And I remember the guitar player, um, at one point he broke a string and he kept playing, and then he broke another string and he kept playing. And it was just like, this fucking guy is like amazing because he wasn't missing a beat, and he was just playing all the right notes, and it was awesome. Um, so after the set, I remember me and the singer Death Valley Girls Bonnie, we walked around to go to the next room to watch another band. And out of the backstage, Rocky walked out, and we kind of looked at Rocky, and he kind of looked at us, and it was just like a moment of like, fucking Rocky. And then he just kind of like, somebody like kind of whisked him away. And then the guitar player walked out, and me and Bonnie walked right up to the guitar player and just like, man, that was such an amazing set. It was so great. It sounded so good. And the fact that you broke two strings and kept playing, and it sounded amazing. And and he was like, super stoked that, because he's like, yeah, that's so cool. Thanks, man. Yeah, everyone always wants to talk to Rocky. And it's like, and it's like, no, you were part of the amazing part of the show. Just want to say thanks for the great gig. And then he asked like, oh, what you got? Are you guys playing? Are you guys in a band? And we were like, yeah, we played today. We're Death Valley Girls. And he was like, oh man, I love your band. Yeah, I have your record. And he knew who we were, so that was really cool. And so it was like, cool. So this guy's name was Eli Southard, and he was like Rocky's main guitar guy, and he played in like when the Elevators did their first big reunion. He was in that lineup, doing Stacy Sutherland's parts. And so he's kind of like Rocky's right hand man, for those years. And so we kept in touch, over time. And there came a point where it's like Rocky's going to do another tour. And Eli had written us and like, hey, do you guys want to, Death Valley Girls come out and be the support band for the Roky Erickson tour? And we're like, yeah, we don't even need to think about this. That's yes. So it was like,
Amazing.
cool. So, and then it was a couple weeks later, Eli had emailed me and he said, hey, the band we were, I'm the only guitar player right now. So, I was thinking like, would you want to, like be in the band and be the second guitar player for, since we're all going to be on tour together, and, this might work out real well. And I was like floored, and I was like, yes. so, so then he sent me, he goes, all right, I'm going to send you some, songs we'll do for the tour. So it was like, 30 something songs, and it was like half Elevators, half Rocky solo stuff. And it was wild because, being a fan and knowing all the music and listening to all this music for years was one thing, but actually sitting down and learning these songs especially the elevator stuff where it was like really wild, like really strange. The way the songs were put together, the chords, the length of the songs, the like everything was really like, like really strange and out there, and it wasn't typical songwriting or song structure.
That's amazing. I had that in my notes here to ask you what it was like to learn
Yeah.
a Roky Erickson song. Did he or the band have certain go-tos or tricks that they like once you figured out, oh, there's this weird chord here, they really like to go to it? Were there things like that in the music?
Oh yeah, yeah. There were certain things where when we play live, say like a lot of these songs were kind of constructed, especially the elevator stuff, where they're constructed more around the lyrics and the fitting in these stories, and so the music had to kind of like, if there's going to be a verse that's like goes for 8, this other verse goes for 16, this other verse goes for 7, like all these weird like things where you're like, you just have to kind of really, you know, practice and get it into your DNA of how these songs kind of uh evolve. And when we played live, there was a lot of little cues and stuff where I would maybe look over at the drummer and be like, if we were playing like a song, like there was a song "Slip Inside This House," which is this epic, tune that sometimes would go longer some nights, and or sometimes Rocky would maybe sing half of a verse and maybe not sing the other half, or maybe sing, it was sort of like some nights he'd just kind of go off on little, some little trip or whatever. So we'd always be like I could only imagine like it being sort of like if you're in, say, like James Brown's band, or you're playing with Buddy Rich, where you're like, you got to be on it, and you got to be like, whatever's going on, you got to go with the flow. If and you got to just don't, you can't be distracted. You have to be like present and connecting with the musicians, um because Rocky was just kind of like, he was just driving the ship, and we all had to kind of just, you know, go along with them. So me and the guitar player or the drummer, we'd always have try to keep, in eye contact, and kind of like feel it out to where stuff was going to happen, because it was always, every night was a little bit different. There'd be maybe extended parts, or yeah, just let Rocky kind of take it where he wanted to take it. Yeah, there was a bit of, of being the tension of like, okay, do a little improv here because Rocky hasn't come in yet, or which was also really exciting because it was very rock and roll and very like
Right.
punk and very like, because most nights Rocky was on it, and but there would be some times where he'd, maybe get off script a little bit. And the one amazing thing that really struck me when I first started playing with them was that Eli, the guitar player, every night would want to do a different set every night. So it wasn't like, we knew like every night, like, okay, we know the, stop starts, or what's next to expect. It was like throwing different songs every night. And the thing that struck me was Rocky didn't know what songs we were going to play. We'd just be like, pretty much right before we got on stage, hand Rocky a set list and be like, here's a set list tonight, Rock. And be like, all right. And then we'd get on stage, and Rocky would know just by the first couple chords of the song, he would know what we're playing, and he would start singing without even like doing his homework, or he would just, it was just such a part of his being that he would just know, and to be like,
Wow.
songs we hadn't played. We played that song, 5 nights ago. We're going to play it again. Yeah, he would just know just by the, first couple notes or whatever. So it was like really wild,
Right.
part of that kind of like, yeah, a part of that band.
And were you all traveling together?
We were like, they were in um their own van, and we were in our own van. And but we were
Right.
pretty much, like we had to be there for Rocky sound checks, and so we were pretty much together. For most of the tour, we were kind of like, besides even the hotels, we'd be probably staying at the same hotels and hanging out. And Rocky also, so his wife, who was in the movie, who was his ex-wife or ex-girlfriend, like Dana, who's in the film, she was with Rocky. She was with us on tour too. And Jagar, Rocky's son, who's in the movie,
Yes.
he was kind of like the tour manager, and the jug player. So it's
Amazing.
very much a family affair. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't know he was the jug player.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's I will say that's very beautiful.
Yeah, it's very cool because him and Rocky's relationship was a beautiful thing, and Jager had a son, and so Rocky, got to see his grandson and hang out, and Dana was super cool, and it was a really nice vibe and really like a family thing, and it was so cool to. And the thing about like watching the movie now, I hadn't watched the movie since I had met Rocky and been in the band. Like I'd watched the movie years before that. So watching it again with this new perspective and knowing Rocky and knowing Jager and knowing Dana and so it gave me a whole new kind of appreciation, knowing like, oh wow, these people were, people I knew, people I know. And so it was like really interesting to watch it now, like going through the experience of being in Rocky's world and stuff. It's really cool.
Yeah, to him just being able to perform at that level is something that in the film you wouldn't necessarily imagine
Yeah.
would happen.
Yeah.
And I think it's kind of incredible and it was such a good time for him to kind of either be rediscovered or first time for people to be able to ever to see him. It just seemed like people were really so excited and touched that they were going to be able to see Roky Erickson perform again at such an amazing level with so many great songs. I know it meant the world to so many people who lived in those records but never thought they'd ever hear him sing.
Yeah.
Well, this has been amazing. I love that you picked this film. It was so intense to revisit and just get a different vision of what I thought the film was from what I originally remembered, which, a lot of the films people pick, I've seen a lot of times and can play it forward and backwards. And I remembered a lot of this film, but I was really struck at just how much more kind of tragic and harrowing it was at the time this film was being made. It was not a film that was looking back. Right. It was a film that was completely in the present. And the fact that you got to be part of Rocky's world and had, and were such a fan, I think is just really incredible. So thank you for picking it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for having me. Like, this is because I was just like, man, there's so many movies in the rock and roll music, documentary world. And I was like, what do I pick? There's so many. And then I was like, should I do a Seattle, leaning one, or should I do punk rock? There's so much. And I was just like, I think I was inspired by Nick's choice of doing the Minutemen Mike Watt doc, where it's like, the Rocky one is a real special movie, and then I had the kind of personal connection to it. So I was like, I'll do that one. So I'm glad I picked it.
Well, at the end of every interview, I ask the same question, but I tailor it depending on what the film is. So, on a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest, how many rock and roll Rocky screams do you give this film?
Oh, man.
I'm talking like you're going to miss me level screams.
Yeah.
Like outro screams with a fade out.
Yeah.
On a 1 to 10.
The real deal howl, Rocky howl. I have to give it 10 Rocky screams, because just the fact that just the fact that it was I think that the timing of of when it was made, and just the snapshot of that particular time of Rocky's life. And and it being like, it's not a Rocky documentary or an Elevators documentary. It's a documentary about a fractured family, and about
Yeah.
the the messed up, like, the mental health, the issues, and the way the America's, like, just everything about. There's so much to it that it really is enlightening in a lot of ways. And as far as, like, just a really, like, it's kind of like a portrait of a dysfunctional American family, and like all the different characters. And it just happens to be this amazing, you know kind of center around Rocky, and this amazing, beautiful talent. And I think it deserves a 10, just for that, fact of, like, as a documentary, it's really well done. And
Yes.
you know yeah.
Yeah, we're lucky we have it. As hard as it is to watch, it's an amazing story to tell, and he deserved it deserved to be told, however hard it is
Yeah.
to watch at times. And it's such a great, way for him to, again, to do what he did at the end of his life, something he was so good at, and
Hmm.
was just it's just perfect, you know.
Yeah, it really is. And I really like, there's a cool little part in the film that I think it's just a little bit, but it's that little clip of Thurston Moore and Byron Coley, and they're sitting with the Elevators, their Rocky stuff, and they're just, like, fanboying out on, their collections, and the way they were talking about how Rocky was, like, one of the very few artists who had that sort of, like, second, but actually it was third acts, because Rocky, the Elevators, the Rocky solo thing, and then the Rebirth, the third act of Rocky's life, which, that whole story still hasn't been told, because it's
No,
like
it
there's so
hasn't.
much to it. Yeah. So, but I think it was really cool just to add those guys, get that little part in there as music fans, and both of them being pretty, important heavyweight dudes in the underground scene, and kind of like, just how important he is to not only just rock and roll in general, but the underground scene and punk rock, like everything. He kind of, like,
Yes.
influenced so much. So yeah.
Well, thank you again, Larry. It was so good to see you. I
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks again, Chris. Yeah. Let's do this again sometime.
It's a deal. It's a deal. We'll night
Cool.
flight out.
Yes, for sure. For sure.
Thank you for listening to Revolutions Per Movie. We release new episodes every Thursday on your favorite podcast app, and additional bonus episodes every Sunday on our Patreon. The show's a completely independent affair, so the best way to support the show is through our Patreon at patreon.com/revolutionspermovie, where you can get weekly bonus episodes and shows, exclusive limited edition flexi discs and records and CDs featuring guests that have appeared on the show, and other exclusive goods sent to you just for joining. You can follow us on social media at Revolutions Per Movie, and also find out more information about our various guests in the episode show notes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week. Bye!